Welcome to our continued journey to discover the cornerstones of the Jewish Christian culture, which has existed for 3,000 years. And those cornerstones are discovered in the first 11 chapters of the Genesis, which we refer to as campfire stories rather than history. And we concluded last week with the deeper reason why the Elohim story of creation was included in the composition of Genesis. It's also important why it was placed first at the beginning as the anchor of Hebrew literature. I think it was included and placed first because without the story, some of the basic cornerstones of the Hebrew social order would have been lost. And the first of those was what we discussed last week, and that is the first cornerstone, creation. All of creation is good. Now, this week we discover another cornerstone as we probe the nature of humankind, and we sort of concluded with Genesis 1:25 last week when God said, Elohim said, all of creation is good. So now we discover the nature of humankind that begins with verse 26, because the Elohim story of creation contains an explicit understanding of the unique nature of humankind as a part of the created order. Now, imagine with me the extended family sitting around a campfire, and maybe the prompting question of the story time was asked, what makes us different than the rest of creation? And the sixth day of the creation story was told. In one sentence, then God said, let us make man in our own image. Now, nothing else, no living thing was created in the image of God. Only humankind. Simply stated, image means reflection. Humankind is a reflection of the nature of God. This made clear to those who heard the story that there's a spiritual dimension of human nature which essentially links humankind to the divine. And that's the spiritual dimension of human life. Now, this understanding in the creation story is the foundation of the word that's been used through the centuries, imago Dei, which means the image of God, defined the human race for these 3,000 years. Humankind, you and me, we are not just another part and another piece of the created order. We're different. We're distinct. We are a spatial piece, for in us is a reflection of God. Now, this is a cornerstone. It's the starting point of the Judeo-Christian culture. It provides stability for the culture, which affirms the sanctity of human life. Now, this understanding later on led the prophets to conclude that their God was the God of all people on earth, even those awful people in Nineveh, those terrible people in Sodom and Gomorrah, even those half-breed Samaritans in Jesus' day, even the marginalized in every generation, and according to the life and teachings of Jesus, do you know that even the enemy is created in the image of God? Whenever you encounter another, you're encountering the image of God. Wow, that's a cornerstone. Now, as we reflect on the history of human thought about God, a weird reversal has happened. You know, often humankind has chosen to create God in our own image. We create God in the image of man. So if I hate another, God hates the other as well. If I covet even another person's spouse, God covets alongside of me. If I declare war, God declares war as well. You see, the first story of creation lays the cornerstone against this reversal that has taken place. Any thought that God reflects the nature of humankind is denied in this first story of creation, because this first story of creation declares unequivocally humankind is a reflection of the divine, not the other way around. Now, this spiritual linkage with God is described in the Hebrew terminology, the Aramaic, as hesed, the steadfast, caring love. And in Jesus' life and teaching as agape, that compassion and sacrificial love. When humans relate to others with the attitude of agape, God, the divine, is present in that relationship. Because as I am here with Maddie reflects God. I reflect God. So in our relationship, there is God's presence. You see, when the voice of God calls, often it is in the medium of a human voice. In the second letter, in 1 John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John are very brief letters of the New Testament. But listen to what we read in 1 John 4, the 30th verse. The 20th verse. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God should love his brother also. You see, being created in the image of God, that spiritual linkage with the divine forms the spiritual nature of the human relationship with each other. For as we touch another, as we speak to another, as we embrace another, we are embracing God. A powerful cornerstone. So we discover the second cornerstone in the first creation story, right after the interlude of God saying, and all of creation is good. Then we have this verse, single verse, that is the cornerstone of the social order for 3,000 years. What if this first story of creation had not been included in the composition of Genesis? The last 3,000 years would have been dramatically different. For as foolish as humankind has been from time to time in our history, think how much worse and how much more foolish humankind would have been without this cornerstone of the Jewish Christian tradition that humanity, all humans, are created in the image of God, including you and me. As you think about this, here's some questions that you might think about. Who are those individuals or groups that you find most difficult to recognize as persons created in the image of God? Secondly, is the denial of this cornerstone the root cause of racism and sexism? That's probably enough to think about, isn't it? We look forward to next week.